Kath. I'm the Vice Chair of the Cottage Grove Public Service Commission. I'd like to welcome all those in the audience and those viewing this evening out there. We are calling this meeting of the Cottage Grove Public Service Commission to order. This is November 17th, and we're starting at 7 p.m. First item on our agenda was call to order, so I've accomplished that one. Moving on to the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. With that, I'll ask for a roll call. Thank you. Next item is the approval of our agenda. I'll ask for the approval of the agenda with one addition we have this evening. We are going to add a presentation B for an e-bikes presentation. So with that, I'd ask for a motion to approve the agenda with the addition of 8B e-bikes.
I'll make a motion.
Do I have a second? And a second? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes. Moving on then, the approval of our meeting minutes. These minutes were from our September 15th meeting. All of our commissioners had a chance to review these before the meeting, so if I could I please get a motion to accept the meeting minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Okay, there's a motion, a second?
I'll second.
We have a second. With that, all in favor of approval of our meeting minutes, signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes. Moving on to open forum. At this time, anybody in the audience can come forward to speak on any item outside of our presentations or business items this evening. Not seeing any, we will move on to our first business item this evening. It's item which is our Snowmobile Club map approval, and we'll kick it off with Ryan with the presentation.
Thank you, Chair, members of the Commission. So each year we like to connect with the local Snowmobile Club. This is our chance just to talk about what's going on in the city. Is there any changes in town that could affect the snowmobile trail? Just want to make sure we can preserve that ability to snowmobile in Cottage Grove. I think it's a good amenity to have access like we do to the Star Trail and the local trails as well. So we like to talk about what type of development is coming up, how could that impact the trail, and how can we make sure we keep the snowmobile trails open. We also have on the screen the map of the Star Trail and specifically the Cottage Grove section. So each year we like to do an approval of that map as well. And I will say a couple of the key items for next year that we're already working on with the staff is, we're starting to see development potentially east of Keats Avenue. So making sure we can maintain that snowmobile trail along Keats Avenue. And then as we get more development, kind of in the south part of town as well. So with that, Jeremy Goebel is here with the local Snowmobile Club. So I'll turn over to him just to talk a little bit more about last year and any changes for this year.
Flyers for you guys. I obviously didn't bring them up.
No.
That's okay, we can share.
Okay, we can share.
That's all right.
You can pass those down.
Good evening. I am Jeremy Goebel. I am the president of the East Cottage Grove Scramblers. I live up here on 70th Street by Lamar Ballfields. Our snowmobile club's been around since before my time, and I just have become the president, and they won't let me quit because I do such a good job, I guess. So I passed out a couple flyers. We put on the show called Dust 'Em Off. It's held right in my farm field by Carboni's there. It's a great event. We bring a lot of people to the community. It gets bigger and bigger each year. We work with the Lions Club. I worked with the PD before, and we're actually putting up a heated tent this year. So if it's cold, people got a place to go warm up and get out of the wind. So, but I said it's a great event. It's getting bigger and bigger, and we're thrilled to have it here. So, as far as the snowmobile trail, I am a member of the Washington County Star Trail as well, and I am how would you say that? For Min USA, I'm a board. I'm on the board of directors, but I'm just for Region 6. So I take care of it's from like Forest Lake down to Dakota County is our region. So, but as a Star Trail, I am the area specialist for Cottage Grove area, and that consists of everything south of Valley Creek Road. So our club maintains and marks from Valley Creek south, all the way down along 95, through Woodbury on Bailey and 19, all the way down to the county point. That's like the Holiday gas station down there. Come back down to Anderson Renewal and then to the VFW. Then along back through the park right behind us here. So the only questions I had is, I know there's talk of development on tanks here, and the trail does run right through the middle of the field. And it is a lot nicer to run through a field than it is in a ditch, and it's also safer to be in a field versus a ditch. And then I also had heard possibly some development going on by Walmart maybe in that field. Right now, we currently run on top of there. There's a gas line easement. We come in the backside to get to the VFW, and they love having the trail back in there because for years you couldn't get to it, and they're thrilled to have us back in there. So I just kind of like to know how we're going to work on keeping that trail open for those areas. If there's any comments or anything. And then there was one other thing. Down on Hunter Street by Hadley, we've been talking to our club members now at the development on Gray Cloud Island. It'd be nice to have some kind of trail go down along 103rd to get those residents access out to the trail. So I don't know if that's something we can look into. Obviously, probably not for this year because it's kind of getting late in the season, but that would be another option to get people out of town. And then also Junction 70th is on the Star Trail map as a sponsor, and they have a star on the map. And the trail used to go down there years ago, and it got shut down. If there's another option for us to work around to get the trail back open to them, and I don't know if that might be down the New Ravine Parkway or taking Military and coming down Hinton somehow, if there would be a way to work with the city on that to get that reopened, because I know they'd be thrilled to get the business back as well. Sure. So with that, if you guys have any questions for me or concerns. Yeah. I also have the Star Trail coordinator with us here tonight. If you got any questions for him, he's newly appointed to the position, but he's just lives over in Denmark, so he's from this area. He's familiar with the trails and whatnot. So
sure. Well, thanks, Jeremy. With that, then I'll open up to any commissioners that have any questions or comments first. I think what we should do is we'll put it into two buckets here for Jeremy. Why don't we talk just the current map we have in front of us to approve that, and then from there we can maybe have a quick discussion on maybe some of the other items you brought forward on the new developments coming forward, if that seems reasonable. So with that, are there any questions about the current map that we have in front of us that we had a chance to review? There's really no changes to it from what I could tell from last year.
Nope, everything's the same.
Okay. So if there's no questions about the map, then I'd ask for a motion to approve the snowmobile map for this year.
I'll approve.
We have a motion, second?
I'll second.
We have a second. With that, is there any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
And those opposed? Motion passes. With that then, I'll open it again to commissioners. If you have any thoughts or maybe some comments that maybe can help Jeremy for some of the developments and keeping snowmobiling viable here in Cottage Grove. And I know, Ryan, you had mentioned to me that there's already dialogue with the city and the club to try to work some things out. I don't know if you have anything you could help share first.
Members of the commission and chair, just kind of in general, I think ever since we did, I want to say lose the 70th Street Trail, we've tried to make a pretty concerted effort to maintain our trails in town, especially when roads are expanding, like we did down on Hunter Street. We actually widened that road, added trails and everything a couple of years ago, and we were able to make sure we had a route for the snowmobiles that we maintained. I will say for Keats, similar situation there, the road itself isn't changing, but like Jeremy said, it does run more in the field, so I think that's something we have to look at as there's still development. There will be a extremely wide right-of-way, and then there's also an easement with the Met Council sewer that's actually even outside of that, so there's gonna be a lot of nice open buffer space between Keats Avenue and the homes, so I think that's what we gotta look at, and then just kind of setting the stage, right? You want that understanding that the snowmobile trails are there. We want to keep them there and make sure people understand it's a positive overall for the city. So that's just kind of an ongoing dialogue with our planning staff, I would say, as well.
Sure. Okay. Captain Peterson, is there any data? I'm probably throwing you a little bit under the bus here, but like last year, did we have any citations from snowmobiles at all, or any noise complaints that you can think of?
I'll apologize, I didn't come prepared with the actual data, but I can tell you just anecdotally, there are very few incidents, and I can't think of any citations or arrests that are related to snowmobile offenses.
Okay, thanks. And maybe Jeremy, if you could maybe for the public, give them a little sense on, how often are the trails being used? Like what time of day, how late into the evening? Because I would imagine that from a residential, it's more about the noise at midnight, a snowmobile come fly in my backyard type thing.
Yep. It's pretty much, sun up till, it's past sundown, I would say, but all my years and experience, I don't ever see people out ripping around much after 9, 10 o'clock anyways, because it's just, you're too late anyways, but we do a very good job of when there is enough snow. The last couple of years we haven't had that, but we do a very good job of grooming to keep people on the trails instead of veering off into random places, and so we work really hard on that. But like I said, I don't see people running late. The weekends would probably be the busiest times, or right when kids get out of school and they want to go rip around a little bit, but that's what I've been noticing.
Sure, okay, good.
And I do know a lot of people do utilize the parking lot out at Lamar now. So, because they used to park on 70th Street at Highlands parking lot, and since we lost that section of trail, the city gave us the Lamar parking lot, so that's a nice area for everybody to come, and the city plows it out, so they got a place to park. Or actually, the one year we raised enough money, we put an AED out at the Lamar ball fields there for the city. So, and then I believe last year as well, we donated to the Canine Fund, and I think it went towards the wood boxes for the dogs for training, which are also out at Lamar, so.
Nice.
Yep.
So I grew up on snowmobiles. You could go out our front yard and hop on the trails and go all the way to County Point. So I appreciate this conversation. What I'm wondering is, you mentioned tanks and selling some of that property, and there might be some areas. Did you guys have suggestions? Did you come with any ideas on how to expand your area?
Yeah, just leave us a spot right through all the houses. No, well, like Ryan had said,
Yeah.
the Met Council line runs through there,
Yeah.
and also the Northern Natural Gas line runs through. There's 2 lines that run through there that come across my field and go kitty corner across Tanks. At basically from like Old 70th, and it comes across the field at an angle towards 80th and 19. So obviously they can't build anything on top of that, I'm assuming, so that would be another option. Or if we can go further to the east around it, but the drawing I had seen, they want to put Ravine Parkway through there, kind of on top of that new stormwater pipe they put in. If there's wide enough easement there for us to run on, otherwise we'd have to move out further east. But then I saw potential of a development of that field as well, so I don't know, So we got like 3 options probably. I'd prefer to keep it out in the country versus in the ditch, because once you get north of Cottage Grove, that's all it is just pure ditches and driveways, and it's no fun. A lot of people like trailer down here to go riding here because we have farm fields and you get to go through the woods and whatnot, so.
Any other comments or questions? I know for me, I'm an avid snowmobiler too, and I've always said I grew up in Inver Grove when like Highway 52 came in and they expanded that, and my mom and dad were really active in their snowmobile club at the time, and that's the time to really get ahead of it when the construction's not there already. So the dialogue, I think, is good that we're doing it before any pavement goes down. And then if we can convince maybe not to plow our streets right down to the bottom back in the day. We used to, in Inver Grove, just leave from your house and go too, and go all the way down to Dakota County and all that kind of stuff. So I applaud your club for all the effort and all the work you do. I'm one that's been at the last couple of shows that you guys have had out there, the vintage run and stuff. That it's just a hoot, and it's a great time that you guys put on for it. So thank you for doing that. And excited to have you always come forward and bring this to the front of the public for us. So, but I think what I'm hearing from the commission is that we're definitely proponents, and we think it's an amenity for the community here. Is another thing we can hang our hat on and say, hey, we're one of the communities that still want that type of recreation, because it is a fun recreation sport. So with that, then, thanks, Jeremy. And then I will look forward to coming to your event. It's the flyer he handed out to us, folks. It's January 10th, starting at 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. So I know you'll probably have a lot more information out there, but we'll look forward to it.
Yep, thank you.
All right, take
Have a
care.
good night.
Yep.
Thank you.
Chairman, do you want these back? No, you guys hang on to them. Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it.
All right, we'll move in. That's our one and only business item for this evening. We'll move into presentations. Our first presentation is the fire service evaluation study presentation, and I'll turn it over to Chief John Perkick to kick it off for us.
Chairs, Commissioners, thank you for having us tonight to present our fire service evaluation study. And also thank you, some folks on the commission did attend our focus group, so you might hear some information you've heard, but we've also added additional pieces to it as well. Earlier this year, we did an RFP process to do a fire service evaluation study. You also hear it be called a standards of cover and community risk assessment. And a lot of times we shorthand that to standards of cover. With that, it was really based a lot on our strategic plan last year, where we did a 5-year strategic plan, which this commission had a lot of good feedback on and helped develop that. And then how do we kind of match the resources and needs of our community to fulfill the vision of our fire department. And one of the biggest precipitating pieces to this study was, what do we do a station for? It's no longer a response station. In order to do that, we really had to engage experts in the field to evaluate that. But on top of that, also evaluate, as we're a rapidly growing community, looking at how the fire department can best serve that rapid growth. So tonight we have BJ Youngman and Mike Mondor from Fitch and Associates that's going to share a draft briefing report on thus far some of the findings in these, and also seek your feedback on that. And also, we're very fortunate through our RFP process of Fitch as a national firm. However, Mike and BJ are both have extensive experience in the Twin Cities and also serve as fire chiefs in the Twin Cities. And while they're not representing their departments tonight, they do know kind of the landscape of the Twin Cities, and frankly have both been leaders in both the state and the metro in advancing fire and EMS services. So they are the experts, I would say, in our state and our metro. So please, if you have questions about anything, please take this time to pick their brains, because they truly have been instrumental in transforming EMS and fire for the betterment in our area and our community. So I'll turn it over to them, and they can walk you through this draft report briefing.
Good evening, Commission. Chief, thanks for the introduction. My name is BJ Jungman. I'm a senior consultant for Fitch and Associates, and we're honored to be here to present to you tonight. I've been in the fire service for 25 years, second generation firefighter. I grew up in the metro here, and as Chief Pritchard said, serve as a fire chief in the metro. Also a paramedic, and have worked as a volunteer all the way up through career department. So worked in many different models, worked in private EMS, hospital-based EMS, and now fire-based EMS. Also worked in a dispatch center for a while. So got some varying experience in the public safety realm, and I'll let Mike introduce himself.
Good evening, and thank you for having us. My name is Michael Mondor. I have 23 years in fire EMS service, similar to BJ. Started as a volunteer. I've worked in part-time, full-time combination models for the duration of my career. A master's degree in organizational leadership with a focus in fire science administration, and both of us have our executive fire officer and chief fire officer designations from the Center for Public Safety Excellence, and we're just happy to be here tonight.
Awesome. Procedural-wise, is it easier for it to go through the presentation first and questions after, or would you like questions as we go along?
Feel free to ask questions as we go along. If we think we're going to answer it in a future slide, we'll just tell you that. But that way it's fresh in your mind and you're not trying to remember it. So feel free to interrupt us along the way. So
Okay, fair enough.
thanks for asking. All right, so we'll talk a little bit about the firm, talk some substantive issues, and then a little bit on recommendations and findings, and then answer any questions you might have. So again, we're in the draft stage. None of this is finalized, and we still have some more work to do to frame out some recommendations, but this gives you kind of a good backbone of what's coming with the standards of cover. So a little bit about Fitch and Associates. We're a consulting firm, and we look at fire and EMS systems and dispatch centers. We have multiple pieces of the firm. We've been in business for over 40 years, and we've consulted on all but one continent, all across this country, all across North America, and like I said, on other continents as well. We do a lot of standards of cover. We do a lot of strategic planning. We look at systems, and what I really like about our firm and why I chose to be part of this firm is we ground a lot of our recommendations in data. We think that helps reduce bias. You don't need Mike and BJ's great opinion. You want to know why something is happening, and we ground ourselves in that data. And so we take a lot of pride in our recommendations that they're based in substantive issues that we can back up why they're issues. So you'll see a lot tonight on the data analysis we do. We do heavily data analysis and GIS analysis, and then there's also the qualitative side that we do with stakeholder input and interviews with folks. So yeah, that's a little bit about our firm. We're based in Kansas City, but our consultants are from all over the country. In my 8 years, I've had the fortune of consulting all across the country from the East Coast to the West Coast. And so it's a little bit about us. When you look at project deliverables, we really have this broken down in 4 phases. The first phase is the qualitative data analysis. That's always kind of the first phase because that seems to take us the longest. It's a bit challenging sometimes to get the data out of the systems and get it analyzed. And then phase 2, we get into the GIS and station location analysis. We'll show you a little bit of that tonight. And then phase 3 is the community risk assessment. At the end of the day, the fire and EMS department is really a risk mitigation tool. So you need to understand the risk in the community now and what it's going to be in the future in order to plan for what your future organization might look like. And then phase 4, kind of where we're getting, is the standards of cover and findings and recommendations. And so we're in the middle of phase 4 right now is kind of where we're at. So first 3 phases are pretty well wrapped up with draft reports on all those pieces. And then phase 4 is what's coming forward here in the next month. So some of the key considerations that we've come up with is improving dispatch time, turnout time, and total response time, and we'll show you a little bit on each of those buckets coming up here. Then the considerations, as the chief had talked about, for fire station location, particularly Station 4 and our regional solution. As you likely know, you provide fire service to the city of Cottage Grove, and your EMS landscape goes beyond the borders of Cottage Grove to 3 other communities. Also, some capital planning for the department, particularly around vehicles. We know fire department vehicles are not cheap. And they've gotten more expensive, but at the same time, you want to make sure that you have highly reliable vehicles that have modern technology in them to support your staff in providing service to the community. Also, the stakeholder feedback. We did some input from the stakeholders, and also looking at cost recovery considerations. We'll talk a little bit about that tonight. And then thinking about adding additional dedicated EMS transport unit to deal with your increasing demand for EMS volume. So that's kind of a high-level overview of what we're going to talk about. When we look at this, this is your response times. So this is at the 90th percentile. So really quick, you're probably used to seeing average response times. Those are very commonly reported. We will show in the data report the average response times, but if you think about an average, that's a coin flip. So if you're the one calling 911, it's a coin flip on whether we get there in that amount of time. Half the time we're going to get there at less than that time, and half the time we're going to get there in a longer period of time. So it doesn't show you with great reliability how the system operates. So this is what we call the 90th percentile time. So this means that 9 times out of 10, we're going to perform at this level or better. So it's a function of reliability. So when you hear 90th percentile, that's really what it is 9 times out of 10, we're going to be at this response time or better. Does that make sense? So it's a different response or a different measure than average. So you see that we broke it down on the left column through EMS, and then we broke down all the cities, Cottage Grove, Newport, St. Paul Park, and Gray Cloud Island. And then you see on the fire side, we have the fire bucket, the hazmat, and the rescue bucket. So you can kind of see by program the times. The first bucket there is the dispatch time. So in theory, this is from the time the call picks up until the fire department knows there's a call going on. That's what we call dispatch processing time. That's the first bucket. The second bucket is turnout time, from when the firefighters know there's a call until a truck is leaving the station to head towards the call. That is called the turnout time. That is the time that the fire department has the most control over, is the turnout time. And then the response time is the time from when the truck leaves the station until it is at the doorstep of the address that they're calling from. So that is the travel time. Then the overall response time is all 3 of those buckets. But I want you to look at them as 4 different buckets, because if you add up the 90th percentile of each individual bucket, they will not add up to the 90th or the total response time, because you are having different measures of each of those statistically. So your dispatch time is 4.3, your turnout time is 3.1 overall. Your travel time is 9.3 with a total 90th percentile of 14.3. I would tell you to look at the response time more than the individual buckets, because there's a lot of nuance in how that data is captured and reported. So really, from a public policy standpoint, the biggest number we want to focus on what's acceptable to the community or not, is that 14.3. Sorry, so you had a question?
I did have a question, but maybe I'm just trying to understand on the dispatch time.
Yep.
So you have an average of 4.3. Is that 4.3 minutes from the time that a call comes in for the dispatch to turn that around to Cottage Grove Fire Department?
That is correct. That is how that is measured.
I don't understand the 4 minutes.
Yeah, so there's some nuance in that. So you got to remember the average is going to be much lower than that.
Okay.
So the 4.3, and part of this is, the chief and I were talking about this before we came over here, part of this is really technical in how they're dispatched. So their individual units are not dispatched, but their station is. So part of the dispatch time is also accounted for in the turnout time. So there's some bleed over between those two. That's why I'm trying to focus you on the overall response time, because it's a function of how they're dispatched, that the actual call processing time might be slightly lower than that.
All right. Thank you. Just, it felt like a long time and I wasn't understanding.
It is, and there's a function of, when we get to the 90th percentile, we're encompassing a lot of calls, and there might be times, for instance, where we need language line, right? That might take a longer,
That makes sense.
because you got to remember, we're talking about 10% of the calls that are longer than that. So we're hitting a pretty high subset of the calls at the 90th percentile. Or there could be multiple calls going on, not enough call takers due to the volume. There's a number of things that could get you up there.
Okay.
Does that
Thank
help?
you. Yeah, it does. Under hearing that side of it.
Yep.
Helps me understand better. Thank you.
Very good. So if you look in the kind of the center bottom there, best practices established by the National Fire Protection Association says the dispatch time should be about 2 minutes. The turnout time should be about 1.5 minutes. And then the travel time should be 4 minutes. Now, something to consider about the travel time is both the urban and the suburban standards are the same, but yet the concentration is very different. Like the concentration across the entire Cottage Grove service area may not be urban, yet the standard in the industry is still 4 minutes. So just remember, those are benchmarks, not anything you have to meet, but it's a point of reference, right? So when you look at that, you're looking at a little over 7 minutes if you add all those pieces together. You're a little bit higher than that. I wouldn't say it's off the charts too high. It might be a little longer, but you have a bigger area you're covering from a single station. And we'll get into some of the geography coming up here. So, but one of our recommendations is to better align our dispatch and turnout times and data collection with best practices. There's a way to parse through the data a little better and make sure that we got the right pieces of time in each bucket, to make sure that we are clear on what is dispatch processing time and what is turnout time. So, and then the very bottom of that recommendation is, if we work on the dispatch and the turnout time, that has an excellent return on investment. Because when we start talking about travel time, the only way to really fix that is to put more physical plant facilities and more people in those facilities to take up the travel time. It's a function of distance, right? We can't get there any faster. We don't want to recommend people drive faster and reckless as firefighters in big vehicles. It just doesn't, it's not a safe way to approach it, and the return on investment is so small. So focusing on the dispatch and turnout time from an operational standpoint is an important thing for the chief and his staff to work on. We'll get into the travel time piece here in a minute. And with that, I'm gonna turn it over to
I
Mike.
have a quick question.
Yeah.
And forgive me if you already mentioned this, but I know you said this is based on 90% of the 911 calls. What's the state EMS response average?
Oh, I couldn't tell you off the top of my head.
Okay.
I don't know
And I
that.
just was wondering how close we are to that.
Yeah, and I would say, I don't know that I want to
Okay.
take the average of the state, because you have so many rural areas, right? You might want to take the metro. and-
Or
and I
urban,
don't-
yeah.
I don't know that anybody publishes that currently. It's a great question.
Which
Particular-
which department do you work for?
I work in a metro department.
You don't have to say.
It's all good. I work in a metro department. I would tell you, our travel time is slightly less, but we have 2 stations in about the same geography, give or take a couple square miles. So,
So that's a pretty good parallel in terms of keeping it metro style. Okay,
yeah.
cool, thank you.
So if that's helpful, but
Thank you.
EMS data is a little interesting just because there's private providers and public providers. So the state has the data and some of it's public and some of it's not. So trying to get a comparison on the EMS side is much more challenging than on the fire side. So unfortunately, I don't have an apples to apples comparison, but it's a great question.
Thank you.
Yep.
As part of phase 2 of the study, we conducted a GIS analysis, which uses a marginal utility model to help identify how are our current stations performing, what would the future look like if we moved things around on the map, and knowing that the Central Fire Station is a beautiful new facility, we want to validate that that's in a good place. And so as part of that analysis, 93.5% of all the calls in Cottage Grove can be responded to in travel time. So that's one of the response time elements that BJ had alluded to, in 8 minutes or less. Then when you factor in EMS and understanding that Newport, St. Paul Park, and Gray Cloud Island, similarly, 93.5% of all calls for EMS can be answered in 9 minutes or less from that current central location. And so in other words, the current fire station location is well positioned to meet the community's needs at that travel time performance standard. With Station 4, the question is, the most expensive cost is facilities and then putting staff in those facilities. So if we wanted to operate out of 2 stations, what would that look like? And what we found was that Station 4 is highly duplicative. There's a lot of overlap between the 2 fire stations. And so you're not really increasing the capacity of response and the customer's experience by staffing that facility. You can meet over 93% of the time with that one central location. So we would recommend considering other options for that physical location where Station 4 is currently at, because the level of investment doesn't equate with the benefit. You have a diminishing return of value when you're operating that close in proximity. And while Station 4 was highly duplicative, in talking with community development staff and looking at the future of potential development in the southwest corner of Cottage Grove, we put together some hypothetical modeling of what future locations could look like, where you would start to see return on investment and maintain that travel time over a period of time. And so we're able to model that out and build out potential locations where the city may want to consider purchasing land for the potential of future investment as that part of the area continues to develop. When you're looking at St. Paul Park, Newport, and Gray Cloud Island, if the department would like to partner from an EMS response standpoint, they could coverage those areas at about 95% in that 8-minute travel time. So if the city's desire was to have another dedicated ambulance and just have that staffed as an ambulance, partnerships with Newport and or St. Paul Park could help that overall travel time that all customers are experiencing from an EMS standpoint. Next, we looked at capital. The challenges around fleet and capital for the fire industry have been extremely difficult post-COVID, where ambulances, we used to see turnarounds of about 6 months to get an ambulance, and now you can look at 2 to 3 years. We used to be able to get a fire engine in a year to 18 months, and some manufacturers are out 4 to 5 years. So planning is extremely important. And as you see in this graph, the green line is ideal replacement. And you can see that several of the department's vehicles are either approaching or have surpassed ideal replacement of vehicles. An ideal replacement would be 7 years for moderate duty apparatus such as ambulances, and then those can be held in reserve status for 3 additional years. 10 years replacement for light duty apparatus such as response SUVs and those types of vehicles, and then 15-year replacement for heavy duty apparatus like fire engines, ladder trucks. We would recommend, and industry best practices, the National Fire Protection Association recommend that no apparatus should exceed 25 years from manufacture date and still be utilized in emergency response capacity. looking at that and understanding that it's really difficult, based on the current climate of procurement, and B, from a cost perspective, we established a good, better, best option for fleet replacement for the department. The good option will be contained in the report, and I'll get into it a little bit further here in the next couple slides, but that would be a balanced replacement over time. So we looked at what are the costs of these apparatus, what are the highest priorities, and how can we balance the fiscal impact of that over time. Understanding that it's really hard when you have a limited fleet to balance the fiscal impact of a one-time cost for $2 million for a ladder truck or $1.3 million for an engine. But let's not stack on a bunch of other replacement if we know that those high expenditures are coming. So let's plan for this over time. A better option would look at the combination of ideal and what we've recommended, and to come up with a hybrid model, working with finance staff to say, hey, you know what, this SUV is costing us $12,000 a year in maintenance costs. Let's maybe bump that up here. We can absorb that in year 3 or year 4 instead of year 6 or 7. And then the best would be, to follow industry standards, and so that ideal replacement will be laid out as an option. So a couple different ways to frame it up, understanding that it's really difficult to wave a wand overnight and replace half of a department's fleet. This will be contained in the report, but you have basically an ideal replacement that's based on that 7, 10, and 15-year model that I discussed. And then we looked at what recommended replacement would be, looking at balanced costs over time. And so that's in the far right column. The fire department also reports that it has reduced the size of its fleet as it's consolidated and transitioned to more of a full-time staffing model. And there's additional apparatus that upon replacement could be considered for removal from the fleet, and through some reprioritization of that fleet plan. I'll pause there to see if there's any questions about fleet or GIS. Good.
I have a quick question, and this is more maybe for John and company, but there's been talk about our service areas changing. If that happens, is that going to give us the ability then to reduce some of that data and have a better response time, in addition to having a plan for demographic growth and potentially putting in a new fire station?
Our consultants will actually cover that in the coming slides.
Oh, great.
So
Thanks.
I'll defer to that. I'm happy to answer
Okay.
that, but I think they'll offer a lot of those
Okay.
answer to that question.
Thanks.
So
Thank you.
Yeah, to the chief's point, we do have a slide in here that can kind of look at the different demands from Cottage Grove and then your other partner communities to talk about what that added demand, or if it were to be decreased, what the level of investment would need to be. We also analyzed transport rates. We want to see consistency across all communities served, right? And so there's a much higher number of incidents in the city of Cottage Grove, but you do see consistency if someone calls 911 and the percentage of times that they're transported, that's being equitable across all of the different communities served, which we would expect to see, and that aligns with national averages. Additionally, if you look at kind of the squiggly lines, the dark blue line and the light blue line, that's transport rates over a 24-hour period. And so you would not want to see huge variation in transport rates, let's say at 3 a.m, because somebody wants to get back to doing whatever and not transport somebody, or during peak times where they're just trying to turn calls. Everything that we analyzed within the transport rates was appropriate and aligns with national best practices. So that just reaffirms kind of the services that Cottage Grove Fire and EMS is providing. I'll turn that over.
All right, so we know there's been some discussion because you do provide ambulance services outside of your community, and there is a cost to providing that service, and just like any other clinic or any other healthcare provider, the reimbursement rate doesn't always cover the full cost. So the question is, how do we address that, right? So there's a couple of ways to do that. We came up with 4 of those, and I'll get more into them a little bit as we get into the slides. About why or what. But one way to do that is to think about uncompensated care. And when we look at the uncompensated care, you would take your net bill versus your net collection. We wouldn't use gross because there's mandatory write-offs. Just like when you get your explanation of benefits after you go to a clinic, there's what they charge, and then there's contractual adjustments. So the contractual adjustments bring you down to a net amount. So what you would do is take the uncompensated care and then put it in the buckets based on where the city was served, which city was served, and then bill that difference to whatever city it might be. There's also the cost recovery for actual costs, and that would be done by figuring out your cost to provide ambulance service. What's your staff cost, what's your capital cost per hour, and then distribute it by the EMS percentage, or EMS calls percent by city. So Cottage Grove is 73% of the calls, so you would bear the 73% of the cost of uncompensated care. So you would take what the deficit is from the revenue and distribute it. And Newport's 13, St. Paul Park's 12, and Gray Cow Island is 2%. So you could do that by actual cost, and then you could do it by the allocation of the budget deficit, thinking about what you budget versus what the cost is, and just straight up do it by call volume. And just say you're X percent to Cottage Grove, this percent to St. Paul Park, Newport, Gray Cow Island. The fourth one would be to create an EMS taxing district. The statute 144F allows for a taxing district. It would create a separate board that would be appointed elected officials, so it'd have to be elected officials on the board, and they would directly tax the communities through an apportionment model to pay for that service. So all four of those are options. We're going to talk a little bit about demand and resources. I would encourage any movement towards this to be collaborative, right? It can be easy to say, we need to fill this void, and that's good, but I think taking a long-term approach and make sure it's collaborative would be helpful in making sure that everybody is bought into whatever solution is pursued in this matter. So when you look at this, we looked at both Cottage Grove and all jurisdictions, and what you see is all 7 days here by hour of day. What you see in the green bars that are vertical there is the demand. So how many calls are we going to per hour? And then what you layer on top of that is the geography to meet that 9-minute travel time that we were talking about, is the lighter blue area in there. And then on top of that is the red line. The red line is the amount of vehicles staffed. So currently you're staffing 2 vehicles. And if we look at Cottage Grove only, you're bumping up against those 2 vehicles, not considering the other 3 cities, right? Now, if you take the other 3 jurisdictions and add them in, you're still bumping up against the lines. So from a resource standpoint, although when you look at the numbers on paper, there's a gap in the revenue. When you look at the resources and the sunk cost of providing fire and EMS to the city of Cottage Grove, the cost and the allocation is the same whether you provide ambulance service to only Cottage Grove or to all 4 communities. So I think it's important to understand the sunk cost is already there with the 2 resources that you have, and that demand wouldn't change whether you're doing 1 community or 4 communities, as those other 3 communities don't add that much demand that would tax your resources. And whether you tax your resources or not, in this next slide we're going to show you're going to need resources to maintain the service level, not even necessarily improve them. So if you look at Cottage Grove only, and we look at a modest 5%, which is what most of us are seeing on call demand, and the majority of that we're seeing on the EMS side, within the next 4 years, you're going to need to add a second dedicated ambulance just to stay afloat with that 8-minute drive time. So again, that can be accomplished by adding an additional ambulance 12 hours a day, because what do you see is you see peaks and valleys, right? You see overnight hours, it goes down, daylight hours, it is higher. And most communities see that same bell curve, where 8 or 9 a.m. until about 9 p.m. is about the peak demand for the fire department and EMS department. If you were to take that and take out Cottage Grove and just look at the other 3 cities independently, again, you see how small the demand that adds on top of what the city of Cottage Grove has by itself. So those 2 compare future 5 years with 5% growth and what Cottage Grove is versus the other three communities. Does that make sense in what we're covering? Okay. So when we look at staffing, currently they staff 4 personnel. So that's the first column there in red. So there's 4 24-hour seats. The minimum per shift is 4. They don't run anybody on a 12-hour shift. You see the 3.72, that's a calculated relief staffing multiplier. So all these staff have vacation, sick time, all that kind of stuff, right? So to staff 1 seat 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, it takes 3.72 FTEs when you figure that out. Now that is if everything happened perfectly. If we knew exactly when everybody's gonna call in sick and the vacation was equitable across the entire year. Doesn't quite work that way, but that's how you plan for it. So currently you need 15 FTEs to cover that. They currently have 16, again, to cover that 4 personnel a day. If they were to bump that up to 6 personnel a day, with the 12-hour shift as we were talking about, that would be 4 people 24 hours a day, 2 people 12 hours a day. That would get them 6 during the day, 4 at night. There's 2 different relief multipliers. The 3.72 is the 24-hour shifts. The 2.5 is the 12-hour shifts because they would accrue and work a different schedule. Your firefighters on 24-hour shifts work an average of 56 hours a week. Your firefighters that work 12-hour shifts are on an average of 42 hours a week. So their vacation and sick time accrual and use would be on a different scale. So in order to do that, you would need a total of 20 FTEs, so you're short of that by 4 in order to accomplish that 6 during the day, 4 overnight. If you were to invest and just go to say, we're gonna do 6 personnel 24/7, and we're gonna run 3 units 24/7, you would need 23 personnel, and you would need an additional 7 personnel to make that happen. So, again, your existing deployment really is 2 vehicles, 4 people per day. Our future recommendations and what we're building out right now, as we talked about, is a good, better, best model based on what you just saw in that graph. So we'll be coming back with that here relatively soon to the council and to the staff with the staffing recommendation. But you can see that growth over the next 5 years really puts a strain on the current resources just to maintain a current level of service to the community. So is there any questions on staffing? All right, I'm gonna turn it back over to Mike.
As with our experience in both consulting and as being fire chiefs, the level of investment to staff and to adequately equip fire departments is significant. And so we did spend a significant effort to try to get stakeholder feedback to see what the community thought about the different potential levels of investment. So we had a survey at the fire department's open house in early October, and then we hosted a focus group on October 20th with some of you familiar faces and other people, stakeholders from the community.
We actually had 3 of our commissioners that attended that, myself, Nick, and, or Nate and Jenny, just for everybody's info.
Overall, respondents were highly satisfied with fire and EMS services. There's strong expectations for prompt service. A majority of the survey respondents expecting response times within 4 to 8 minutes, some even wanting less than that. Most participants expressed the desire to have the department, strongly expects the department to participate in outreach, prevention, and engagement opportunities and initiatives. There were questions about the costs associated with some of these changes. There was, conditional support on tax increases if that could be tied to value, such as improving response times, and slightly lower so, but still substantial support to fund prevention, outreach, and engagement initiatives. There were some conversations about regional service and cost sharing, concern about timely mutual aid and demand in neighboring communities, concern about Cottage Grove residents subsidizing the response, and just want a cost sharing model that's fair across all jurisdictions. And I think the key to that is, as BJ mentioned, that we would recommend having a collaborative approach to determining what that looks like. Overall, there was an interest in regional collaboration in the between the stakeholder feedback and the focus group. The primary themes was that there's strong support and trust in the local fire department and Cottage Grove Fire and EMS, desire for fast and reliable response times. There's a general willingness to invest more, especially among those residents and people that had identified as using the service, if they're tied to tangible, real service improvements. As I mentioned, there's concerns about financial equity, and there's openness to structural reforms such as cost sharing or regionalization of the fire and EMS district. With that, we will open up to any questions or comments.
Well, maybe you could expand a little bit, because I remember at the community, or the meeting we were at, you guys did talk about St. Paul Park, that their fire station right now has the capability of actually housing an ambulance right now, or did I mishear that?
Their current facility wouldn't be able to support overnight staffing, and then there's also just if collaboration required, then how do we respond to fire calls simultaneously as well? In terms of like the geographic location, it does offer a prime location for serving both Cottage Grove, Newport, and St. Paul Park. However, there are some logistical challenges with the actual station itself. So you're correct, location is very good. However, there are some issues in terms of the operational pieces that would be comprised with that.
Okay.
Correct, and I would say, yeah, the GIS location suggests opportunity, but there are local policy decisions and the fact that you're balancing fire and EMS response with that. So those are all operational things that in policy level discussions that would need to be had. But geographically, the geoanalysis suggests that there's opportunity there.
So I'm curious on that, the board you guys talked about, the tax board. How does that board come together? You mentioned now it's an elected office versus an appointed office, because that was always my concern, that if you have appointed people that are in charge of taxation, that didn't seem to feel very good to me.
So it's appointed elected officials. It's a great question. So it would have to be elected officials from the makeup of the community councils. So each council would get X number of seats, right? And that's part of the development of that, is what would the power share be on that, of how many seats would Cottage Grove get versus St. Paul Park versus Newport or Great Cloud Island. But it would have to be elected officials from those city councils that make up that EMS taxing district board. It could not be appointed community members. It would have to be appointed elected officials, to your point, someone with an election certificate that is making taxing decisions, not necessarily a community member.
Okay, thanks. Other questions?
Just because I don't know, how many ambulances do we have today?
So currently, we have 2 ambulance, so in terms of staffing or the actual physical ambulance themselves, I'll answer both just for, we have 3 ambulances. Really, with any system, you need at least one backup because ambulances break down, unfortunately, frequently. Secondly, we currently have 1.5 per day. And what I mean by that is we currently have 1 ambulance that is staffed, they're firefighter paramedics. However, that second ambulance has to be cross-staffed with a fire engine. So if a fire call comes out, they're no longer an ambulance. If an EMS call comes out, they're no longer a fire apparatus. So it's robbing Peter to pay Paul a lot of days with that. And then within our system, if we have 2 calls at any given time, we no longer have any sort of fire EMS response coming from Cottage Grove, that we would have to rely on neighboring mutual aid to cover any calls with that.
Okay. And would having another ambulance help fix those times, those response times?
And that's what's what's being suggested here, and I'll kind of give that to him to offer a more succinct question. I will share, though, within that, it would help solve that issue. If we have 2 calls going on, we'd still most likely then reserve that 3rd unit then as a fire engine, so we always can provide a fire response to the city. So it would help coverage, and then I can leave it to them to discuss the actual response times.
Sure. I'm sorry I have questions, because then I was thinking if you had another ambulance, you'd do you have the staff to cover the other ambulance, or would you need to increase that staff?
Currently, no. And that's, again, with what our current FT
Sure.
thing is, we could not provide a third unit right now reliably, so, but,
All right.
but I'll,
And
oh,
I know
excuse me.
that Cottage Grove is on both sides of the railroad. We have over 80 trains that go back and forth a day. Does any of that impact our response times?
So, no, fortunately, what happens is we are able to access southwest parts of the city both through St. Paul Park, which some of our largest apparatus has to go through there because of that train bridge. Otherwise, that does not impact our response times. Hence, it may theoretically, if we run into one, we go, around Holiday on Hadley instead of going out the other way. But no, not on a reliable or consistent basis does that hinder our response time, so.
Thank you.
But that's a good question in terms of that station placement. At one time, Station 4 was placed there, not just to support a volunteer model, but because it's on the other side of the tracks, or potentially could get across the other sides of the tracks.
Thank you.
So this is amazing information with a lot of question marks. What is the plan moving forward, and what does that timeline look like to engage our community and make decisions?
Yeah, from our perspective, we are finishing up the draft report with recommendations, and I believe it's December 3rd. It's coming up here in a couple of weeks. We'll
City
be
Council.
presenting to the council kind
Okay.
of a final draft with all the recommendations.
Okay.
So then our part will be kind of handing it off, and then I'm not sure what the plan is after that, but that will kind of conclude that phase 4 of the study and the
Got it.
standards of cover.
And then strategically, the city council will figure out strategically what works and the plan and the money and the budget over time, I would imagine. All right, thank you.
I have a question about the analysis around the central fire station. As you look forward in the future, obviously our city is continuing to grow, adding more households, adding more people. Did you look forward, is there a point in time where that won't be sufficient to support the city? And do you have any sort of recommendation what that would look like going out 5, 10, 15 years?
That is the beauty of this analysis, is that it's focused, the GIS analysis is focused on the current locations and travel time. So you can get to 93.5% today of calls in Cottage Grove in 8 minutes or less. And so that says that unless there's any major disruptions to your road network, or they put train tracks in every other intersection, which is not likely, that from that location, you will be able to respond in 8 minutes of travel time. And the only variable to that is as the demand continues to increase, that it would look at future investments in the number of bodies or the staff that are required to respond from those areas. So that does account for future planning and future growth. We met with community development and know that there's growth to the west or to the east, and then to the southwest. And that's why we looked at that other hypothetical model. So if you really started to see a boom, you would want more reliable service. And I'll just go to kind of the graph here. Down where it gets light green or is not highlighted, you would want more reliable service there if that area continues to grow. And the hypothetical modeling would say, hey, now if we have 2 stations, we can get there within that 8-minute travel time 90% of the time. So it does account for future growth and allows for the plan to grow in, the staffing plan to grow into that.
So is that Station 4, I'm sorry, or is that something else when you talk about a potential second location?
Where are we here? Let's optimize. So that one.
This one is the one I meant to scroll to. So this is a optimized location
Okay.
versus I scrolled one too far there when I went. But yeah, so we can literally through the GIS analysis, we just take the parcel information and say, like, hey, okay, 3M is here. We're not going to be able to build there. So we just move it to a place that's potentially available. And then if the city gets to a point where they're like, hey, we want to consider this location, this parcel became vacant, we can plug it in and say, here's what you could expect from a system performance standpoint if you wanted to make that level of investment.
And the other benefit to that point is our central fire station, because we're doing some scenarios that if Station 4 would be something that we no longer need. And just to emphasize the point in which Station 4, to make it a usable response station, the amount of money, you're probably approaching over $1 million just to get it to that point. And as we saw here, there's probably not much value because there's so much overlap. But as we were looking at those pieces and possibilities, we also did realize that our central fire station, just with some remodeling without like tearing down walls or getting like foundational pieces, that we could add an apparatus bay and even go up to 10 dorm rooms in there. So it could theoretically house 10 firefighters 24 hours a day. So it does have that potential for growth. However, to the point that we also have to be cognizant of the volume that also occurs in that southwest area. So it gives us a great opportunity to plan for that. However, we still know we have a lot of growth we can do in that central fire station while covering up to 94% of that city in an 8-minute drive time. So frankly, we're in a really good spot while we can do deliberate planning for the future based upon what we've seen thus far. So kudos to folks and everyone involved in selecting the Central Fire Station and putting it on that spot because it was a great selection for that, so.
I have a quick question. Maybe I missed it. You spoke a lot about the growth we would need in staff, but you just touched on a little bit, John, but what about actual apparatuses and things of that nature? Do we know what that need will be looking at that 5-year growth?
Yeah, I would, you want me to? Go ahead, and I can add it. Yeah, I would, in our analysis of your fleet, the current number of vehicles is well positioned to support any of the good, better, best staffing recommendations that we would make. You know, with some adjustments and understanding that over time there might be small tweaks, but when we're looking at the level of investment for fire engines, ladder trucks, you're well positioned. Ambulance, you know, you're really well positioned, but you might be on the cusp of one additional, depending on growth and staffing models.
And that is one, I know it's a big change and it's a monumental step when you kind of convert to more of a more career, all full-time model. But one of the benefits of that is typically you need less fire stations, which we're seeing why many of you that grew up in this community, we used to have 4 fire stations and now we're down to 1. But the other addition is you don't need those 4 fire stations in communities with like 3 or 4 fire trucks apiece. So just in the last 3 years, and we've gotten rid of a fire engine that was essentially just sitting there. We've gotten rid of a brush truck, gotten rid of a UTV, a trailer. So we've already made some of those cuts. And so as we look forward, and as Mr. Mondor had pointed out, we're in a good position. Even if we added staff, all we're doing at that point is, for example, like a 2-person fire engine. Ideally, you have 4 people. So if we add staff, all we're doing is just making that even more efficient and better because we already have the seats to put people in. So it's really, we're in a really good position with a number of apparatus. And then if we replace the engine, we could get rid of that second ladder, which typically have hefty replacement costs. So actually, it's kind of one thing I think I'm really happy about thus far is, A, we made a good decision to get rid of that excess apparatus, but it really does set us up for future growth with that as well. So, but thanks for the question because we are proud of that we're making good, wise stewardship decisions for our community by not having excess apparatus.
I have a question. When it comes to staffing, is the need for staffing in a demand right now, like we're looking for people, or is it because we need to invest in having more people?
Currently, we're in a good spot. We actually have a full complement of our full-time people, which, and I appreciate the question because it is one thing we brought up as we talked about strategic planning, especially on recruitment and retention, is getting good people in the door. So we're there. We're still struggling with our part-time folks and hiring people, and that's, again, across the market. And unfortunately, there's no magic wand to fix that. And again, I'd love to see it, but we're still struggling there. So a lot of these additions for investment, to your point, would be full-time staffing adds to that. So it's not necessarily we need the people because we currently are fully staffed in terms of our full-time staff, is that these additions would be that additional staff on top of the folks we already have.
So then we would have to focus on how are we going to get that staff here and get them hired.
I think it's a good point, though. We still need to focus on that, and we can't lose sight of that because, for example, we were just talking tonight, there's probably the Metro is very fortunate to get some staffing grants from the federal government. And I think we added, there's going to be at least probably, 20-plus open positions probably in the next few weeks and months. And we're always going to be facing that as other communities go through the same significant additions that we're seeing, is that we're always going to have to compete for good people and how can we be competitive. So your point, it's not just adding positions like, hey, but we still have to get them in the door. And I think that still deserves a lot of attention and a lot of innovative approaches to that.
Okay, so something we can focus on.
Yes. Yes.
Mike and BJ, I actually got to draw off your expertise again. I won't put you on the spot and ask which department you work for again. I was actually asking that to kid around, but so this isn't a unique situation we're in, right? Across the metro, this probably happens somewhat frequently. Do you have any, I don't want to spoil the December 3rd suggestions, but do you have any summary you can provide in what some other departments across the metro have done, well, presented with this dynamic? Like, what did they do to solve this problem? Did they pass along any one of those 4 recommendations, or did they come up with a hybrid approach?
Yeah, I mean, it becomes, and then that's what BJ mentioned of you letting the data inform the decision. And then what level of service does the community expect? And so at that 8-minute travel time, if the community expects them to meet that at 90%, that requires investment. And so there's a lot of different policy decisions that are interweaved in that decision, but I think this gives some framework to say if we want an 8-minute travel time 90% of the time, and you're going to still look at the overall response times and chip away at those individual pieces, then this is the level of investment we need today. And as volume goes up, that gives us a benchmark to say, hey, if we're not meeting that, that's going to require future investment. So there is a way to look at alternatives and stair step it in. Really, it depends community to community how they decide how they're going to do that. But there's a large variability in how they've been implemented.
Yeah, because I would imagine, like right now, if you were to go ask pretty much any Cottage Grove resident if they're willing to sacrifice response time, to save a neighboring community some having to kick money in to support, the service that they're used to. Any Cottage Grove resident's going to say, no, absolutely not. I'm more concerned about the response time for my house than I am for somebody down the street that doesn't pay taxes to support what we're currently used to. So I am interested to see how this dynamic decision plays out, especially because, like I said, the residents of Cottage Grove, they get used to the service that is provided, and it's stellar, right? So to sacrifice anything, it's going to be a hard sell to the residents of Cottage Grove, that's for sure.
That's fair.
And thanks for your guys' presentation again. This is the second time I've seen it, so it's fantastic still. Thank you.
I'm just going to throw out there that you might want to go to the mayor's Facebook page and check the comments.
Yeah, I did.
Well, that was going to lead me to a question. This data, as I've always believed too, the data should help be a guide, right? How has the data been receptive? Because I know this presentation's been given to our partnering communities, correct? Mm-hmm. And what's the response been from them? Because, again, as Cottage Grove brought this forward, I'm curious how they interpret the data and what is going to happen. So I don't know if you were all part of those presentations, or John, if it was council that went and presented to our neighboring communities. I'm just curious to hear, because again, to Lisa's point, obviously we're all seeing now Facebook, we have mayors posting stuff all over the place, all the mayors. So I'm more about, okay, how are we going to keep everybody grounded on what are the true facts? That when we have to come to a decision point that we're all kind of in agreement, because once it gets out there, it's the old, I told you, you told him, and she told that, and next thing you know, we got 15 different stories out there. So a lot right there, but I'm kind of curious how this data's been brought up to the other communities.
We've shared it with other we've shared it at the end of September with their city administrators, and we've had discussions, but in terms of like what we're specifically talking about, I would defer that to Mayor Bailey or a member of the council to discuss like the political aspects of it. I think this data and the facts kind of are there. I can speak to that, but in terms of some of the other stuff, I would defer to our elected officials for that.
And I think it's hard right now too, until the actual recommendation comes out, it's still a little bit, everybody are making assumptions too. And I think if we all just stay grounded on at least what the facts are right now and think that the recommendations are grounded in these facts too, I think that'll go a long way. My personal opinion, and I shared it at that focus group, and I'll just share because I know Councilman Thedy's here. The one option that I'd be really nervous about though is that taxing authority. And the reason being is we have control right now. If you create a taxing authority, correct me if I'm wrong, we lose a little bit of control because now you have a number of different members that are all part of that. So you've got that dynamic to work for, and especially I spent a number of years on a school board that was part of a collaborative that was really hard to manage, and we were the biggest district within that collaborative. And once you go into those collaboratives or taxing authorities or whatever you want to call it, you do lose control. And I think that's the one thing we have to really be cognizant of is the control part of it too when the decision has to come. So I share that as my own personal opinion. So any other questions or comments? Again, thank you, gentlemen, for bringing the data for us. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
With that, then, we're going to move to our added agenda item. That is the addition of the e-bikes, and that's going to be presented this evening by Captain Peterson tonight. And I know as commissioners, we did have a meeting with the Parks Commission, I think a little over a year ago. We kind of discussed maybe some different things, and now it's come to a little bit more of a head, and that's why Captain Peterson's bringing it forward to us tonight.
There it is. All right, good evening, commissioners. So fortunately, the issue we have to talk about now is not nearly as complex as the EMS and fire issue, and not nearly as politically charged. So we can all relax a little bit. And
you don't think so?
So anyhow, let's talk a little bit about e-bikes, scooters, etc. We know that their popularity and growth has been skyrocketing in recent years, and that along with that, it brings a lot of safety concerns and increasing demand from our community to regulate these recreational devices to some degree so that our community is safer. And the last thing anybody wants to see is an unfortunate outcome when a car and an e-bike collide and a kid is injured, right? Nobody wants to see that. So there's been a lot of narrative on social media and in general throughout the community over this last summer about how do we make this safer for everybody involved. I can say, and I'll share the statistics with you in a little bit. We've been fortunate in that we haven't seen a huge uptick in crashes and injuries regarding these devices. But what we do know is that the safety risk is higher. The propensity for significant injuries is higher when e-bikes are involved versus traditional pedal bikes or other non-motorized recreational vehicles. And so the other thing that I want to talk about a little bit before we get too far into the weeds on this topic is that I'm saying e-bike for the sake of simplicity, but in reality, there are all kinds of mobility devices that don't fit neatly in that e-bike bucket. And so I want to talk a little bit about that. And so we all have a common understanding of what is an e-bike, what is not an e-bike, and what should we do with those other mobility devices as well. So I'm going to run through some of these definitions and descriptions real quick. I'm not going to get too far in the weeds for the sake of time. If you have any questions, raise your hand and I'll do my best to talk about it. And I'll be the first to admit I'm not an expert on this. I thought I knew it pretty well until I started preparing this presentation, and then I realized oh my gosh, this is way more complex than I realized, and I didn't know what I didn't know, and now I know I don't know. So, and also statute has not been keeping up with this market. And so there's some things, I'm not sure whether this is a motorized bicycle or a motorcycle or an e-bike. I can't tell you today with definity, I can't give a definitive answer what this thing is. And so it makes it really challenging to regulate those and enforce those things. So your Segways, whether it has handlebars or not, that's an electronic personal assistive mobility device. That's a mouthful. You've got your traditional foot scooters that it can be motorized either with gas or electric power, and those may or may not have a seat. And then you've got micro mobility devices, which is really a catch-all. So those devices that you see that are like one-wheeled hoverboards all the way up to your motorized skateboards to these scooter-looking things. So a scooter can only have 2 wheels. So if it looks like a scooter but it has 3 or 4 wheels, I think that's a micro mobility device. It's my best guess as of today. And then you've got your e-bikes. And so you can see the definition before you that can have 2 or 3 wheels. By statute, it has to have a seat. It has to have operational pedals. And in order to be considered an e-bike, the electric motor has to be 750 watts of output or less. And so it's really common to see what looks like an e-bike, but it's got a 1,000 watt motor on it. Those aren't e-bikes. Those are motorized bicycles. So a class 1 has pedals. The motor only engages when you're pedaling, and it can only go 20 miles per hour. A class 2 still tops out at 20 miles per hour, but it has a throttle on it. So you can either pedal, engage the throttle, or both. And then a class 3, the motor only engages when you're pedaling, but the speed goes up to 28 miles per hour. And then, like I said, if it's over 750 watts, that's a motorized bicycle. Motorized bicycles encompass a lot of things. It can be those little pocket rocket scooters. It can be a traditional bicycle with a gas engine on it, or it can be an e-bike with a larger electric motor on it. Then you've got your traditional motorcycles that includes everything from Harleys to dirt bikes to mopeds to these autocycles, which are your 3-wheeled vehicles that you're seeing more commonly now. And then one of the newest things is these neighborhood electric vehicles or the medium-speed electric vehicles. And I'll be the first to admit I don't know much about these, but we are seeing them in our community now. I'm sure you've seen them on social media. There was a posting recently where you're seeing this driving on the road, and I know we've had some conversations with a resident who has a doctor's permission to drive these on our paths and trails. I don't know if that's legal yet or not. I've got to do some research and dig into that, so more to come on that. And then you've got that other bucket of just other stuff that we see on the roads occasionally, utility vehicles, golf carts, etc. And then the last thing I want to note is that there's a wide array of different wheelchair devices that can literally go anywhere. If they have a need for it or some type of disability, it can literally go anywhere. And so along with all of those definitions, classifications, it's important to understand all of those different categories because there's statutory requirements tied to each of those different definitions. There's not a whole lot of uniformity across those different devices to say that, I can't say that none of these devices can be on sidewalks or the age requirement is the same across all of these devices. It's all over the map. And like I said, statute's not keeping up with the market. But what I have done here is I've summarized some of the common statutes. Most of them fall under 169011, where you'll find your definitions and descriptions. And then on the other definitions you'll see pertain to traditional bicycles and e-bikes. And then some of that is applicable to those other devices. And so one generality would be to say that the rules that apply to bicycles applies to e-bikes for the most part, at least in the eyes of the state statute. but that's not a universal statement. It's just a generality. So when we're talking about e-bikes, just e-bikes, none of that other stuff, there's a 15-year-old age requirement. There's no license, registration, insurance requirement. Surprisingly, there's no helmet requirement for e-bikes anywhere in the state. They can go anywhere that a bicycle can go. The exception to that would be they're not supposed to be on sidewalks in business districts. A business district is considered a block that has over 50% of the addresses on that block that's listed as a business versus a residence. So areas like your Hy-Vee business district, that would be a traditional business district where e-bikes are not supposed to be according to statute. And then on state trails and traditional recreational trails, they generally can travel there unless the local municipalities have regulated or prohibited their access to those trails. And then I've got a bunch of our ordinance copied and pasted onto this. The important thing to note is we haven't really regulated e-bikes or any of these other devices yet. You remember as a commission, you visited this topic about 2 years ago, and at that point we decided that we did not want to regulate e-bikes. And so most of what you'll see on our ordinance pertains to bicycles, recreational vehicles, things of that nature. So with that, I'm going to pause for a minute and just open it up for questions because I've dumped a lot on your plates and I'm sure there's questions. So once we get through those questions, I'm going to hopefully guide us through a discussion in terms of where does our community need to go next to enhance our safety. So I'll stand for your questions.
Can you go back a slide or two?
Yeah.
With the age requirements, okay, right here. So minimum age is at least must be 15 or older. Is that like a law? Is that a recommendation, a law?
That's a state law for an e-bike.
Okay, so if you see kids riding around in the neighborhoods that look like they're 10 or 12, they're not allowed to be doing that?
Correct.
Okay. What is the recommendation? Do I call and say something? Do I just let them drive? It's scary to see them out there riding those bikes without helmets on.
Yeah, so we're encouraging all residents to, report that, or if you know the children or you know the family well, talk to them. That's always our first recommendation, but if you don't, call us and we'll deal with it.
Okay.
Enforcement becomes the hard part. Like, what do you do with a 12-year-old who shouldn't be riding an e-bike, right? Nobody wants to see them get ticketed and have to go to court and all that stuff. So, and that's a discussion that I'm going to ask us to push pause on for a minute. And then at the tail end of this, I'm going to talk about what we're doing currently and what we plan to do in the future in terms of enforcement.
There is 3 significant pieces of legislation that are being worked on this year. Part of it is defining motorized vehicle and redefining in 169. So I think that that's something that we need to just keep in mind, although it is very short and it's going to be a very fast session. Who knows what policies will go through. We do have authors for a couple of them, in addition to DWIs on these vehicles, because it's very hard to define if they're pedaling or if they're motorized, and we've had some pushback. So stay tuned for that. The helmet suggestion says shall in the statute right now, wear a helmet, versus must wear a helmet. So there's a lot of, and to your point then, how do you enforce? So there are so many pieces to this puzzle that are out of control, and it's coming faster than we can do anything with. So thank you for bringing this to our attention, and hopefully we can find, we have cities every day who are looking for advice.
Right.
Because it's a statewide issue.
Yeah, and I will say, we're not alone in this dilemma. Every community is struggling with this right now. And everybody's looking to their neighbors to the left and right to say, what are you doing? And I'm going to share with you in a moment, well, you actually have the handouts in front of you. I did find 3 communities who either have or are considering some ordinance changes to regulate these devices a little bit more. So feel free to reference those as we talk about what we should be doing here.
Is there any minimum age on motorized scooters?
12.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions before we move on? All right. So I've unpacked a whole lot, and even after spending countless hours trying to educate myself on this. I'm still very confused on it. And so how do we expect our officers to go out and enforce this and educate the public if, it's this difficult and confusing? So one of the things that we did this spring into the summer is as a department, we created this cheat sheet that you see on the screen before you. It's a quick reference guide to try to figure out what category this device is and what the rules are for it. And this incorporates our ordinances and our state statutes. So it's kind of a one-stop shop. We use this as an educational piece too. So when we do make stops, rather than taking enforcement action, we're trying to educate the riders and their families. We're sharing this on social media and in the schools and things like that. So that's one approach that we've done. All right. Here's the stats that I promised. You can see that fortunately we have not had many incidents at all, and most of those were not very significant. So, but we all digest the news, and we can see that in other communities it is happening with a fair amount of frequency where there are significant injuries and fatalities, and so our goal is to try and prevent that from happening here. Any questions on the incidents? All right. All right, so my goal here tonight is to have a discussion about, as a community, what approach do we want to take? And if we want to see some more regulation, what does that look like? And so what I can share with you, or what I have shared with you, is what Lakeville, Edina, and Excelsior either have done or are about to do. And then Lisa shared what the state is doing. I would caution everybody not to wait on the state, because one of the things that we did in the past and we would likely do again is in our ordinance we would adopt 169 as our baseline, and so whatever the state makes, we would just adopt that. So and then if the state, if there's holes in the state statute, that's where our ordinance fills those gaps. So for example, if the state didn't come along and regulate helmets, right? We could say we're going to adopt 169 and we're going to require helmets. So that's the approach I would recommend. So I'll open it up to you. What are your thoughts, comments on, as a community, where should we go in terms of regulating e-bikes?
I guess my biggest thought is whatever we implement, we obviously have to be able to enforce it, right? So to me, that's the bigger question. Do we have the resources? Are we able to enforce anything of real substance at this point?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got the staffing and the equipment to go out and enforce any ordinance changes. So.
Well, then my suggestion was we need something, because I think it's gotten to the point where something bad is going to happen. I mean, it's a question of, do you want to be reactive or proactive? And I always am a proponent of being proactive. So I think we need to get something out there to be able to enforce and mitigate any, loss of life.
Sure.
Brad, what is your suggestion when it comes to, I'm putting you on the spot. You're dealing with kids here, and so 15 is hard to judge, 12 is hard to judge. They don't have IDs, they don't have anything with them. You're gonna pull them over, you're gonna ask them a question, they're gonna either be honest or not. How is that enforceable then? Do you take the bike and the kid and say, show me where your house is, and it becomes a parent issue? That's the gray I'm confused with.
Yeah, so when we make a traffic stop, it's always needs to be rooted in reasonable suspicion, right? We have to have reasonable suspicion that there's a traffic violation or a crime. And so seeing a kid that's questionable age on a bicycle riding through the park or anywhere in town, that would give us reasonable suspicion to make the stop. Once we make that stop, we can require identification. If they're going to refuse to do that or they don't have an ID on them, then next logical step that is allowed by law is hold them, contact a parent or a guardian so we can confirm their identity, their age, that type of thing. So it's all within the scope and authority of our duties.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
What if a child does not want to give that information at all, like where they live or anything like that? How would that situation be handled?
So we'd handle it like we would any other instance, right? If we catch a 10-year-old shoplifting, and he doesn't want to tell us where he lives or tell us who her mom and dad or guardian is, we work through it. I'm not saying we're going to put the kid in jail, but we've got our ways of holding them, investigating them. And the good thing is that we have a pretty robust RMS system, so generally speaking, we can figure out who this kid is. And we have other means too, like an IBIS, where we can use their fingerprint to figure out who they are if they've ever given a fingerprint before. There's all kinds of ways. And I can't think of a time where a 10 or 12-year-old has refused to identify themselves, right?
Right.
They're too scared to do that.
Yeah, that's
so.
true. I'm more so thinking about teenagers. I have
Yeah.
teenagers right now, so I was just wondering how you guys would handle that.
I'm joking, but once the threat of going to jail is put on the plate, they usually come around and tell us their name and who they are.
So my thought's been, it's even before the enforcement, it's more about the education. What can we do to get in front of, I'm going back, and I don't know if you guys still even do this anymore. I remember when I was a kid, for bike safety, they had like bike roundup, and you would bring your bike and the officers would teach you some things, and then they'd give you a little sticker to put on your bike, and you would actually, it was good too if it got stolen and you had another thing of identification. So I think there's opportunities for us to do that kind of stuff. Instead of waiting for the state to give out licenses, like, I'm thinking of kids that have to have snowmobile permits and ATV permits and gun safety permits. Why can't Cottage Grove start a program to help educate our youth and have some type of an accreditation of some sort that they get an identification on their bike or their helmet, some kind of a sticker or something. So I think we keep trying to do that. The education will be critical, and these little bit of, like these cheat sheets, keep that out in front of adults, I think would be just huge. So I don't know if the school district's been open to working with you. That would be another option to get
Yeah, in fact, I had a conversation with the Youth Service Bureau and the school district this week to see if we could collaborate on this to accomplish exactly what you were talking about. And so at bare minimum, you're going to see a diversion program, so that when we do find kids that are violating our ordinances or our statutes, rather than writing them a ticket, we'll give them a referral to a diversion program where they go to a class, learn about safe use of e-bikes and things like that. And then we're going to try to get an educational component into the middle school this spring, so more to come on that. And so to your point, it's already being worked on. And one of the things that I have considered that I don't know where I stand on this yet, but one of the things that I'm noodling on is the age requirement. Like, what do we do with that 15 to 18-year-old who hasn't gone through driver's ed yet, doesn't know the rules of the road, right? Do we have some type of safety certification course as an offering? If you want to drive an e-bike in Cottage Grove, you have to attend this course and you get a certification that lets that 15, 16, 17-year-old ride an e-bike. And I'm not saying I'm recommending that at that point, but it's something that we can talk about. So.
One thing with education too, I would highly recommend is finding a way to wrap those parents in. Because kids, when you educate, don't normally go home and say, hey, guess what? This is what I have to do to ride my e-bike. And parents don't know what they don't know. Their child wants it for a holiday gift or a birthday present, and they go out and they purchase, and they don't realize the danger behind them. So I think education is a great idea. It's just kind of a win-win.
Yep, I think you're going to start seeing some education on that topic this month before Christmas. So cautioning parents, don't go buy your kids an e-bike just yet, or at least if you do, consider these things. So.
That's nice.
All right. So I'm hearing that we at least want to consider some additional regulation. So I'm going to try to guide us through some more specific stuff. What do we think the minimum age should be to ride an e-bike or these other devices?
18.
And if we do decide that it's younger, do we impose some additional safety certification or something like that? Or do we just defer to the state statute and don't touch it?
So from my understanding, the state statute is going to be 15, correct? Because this is the one that's more than the 750 watts.
Correct.
Okay. I mean, in my opinion, I think that the responsibility that comes with this, I think we should come up with some kind of a program that they could then graduate from to say, hey, I do know the rules of this, because it is, I don't want to say heavy machinery, but, it's motorized, and how, like you said, how are they gonna know the rules of the road if they haven't been through a permit class yet? So I think that, you know, talking about your education piece as well, that's something that we should probably go through with.
Do we know, are the e-bikes out on our bike park being used on the bike park at all? Because the reason why I'm asking the question, because when you think about ages, younger ages, if they're off the road and they're at the bike park, would be okay in my mind, because parents might be there, but they're off out on a bike park. But on a road, then there could be a different age requirement. That's where my head goes to, depending on location. Streets could be 15, if that's the number. Seems reasonable in my head, because that's middle school age at that point. But younger kids that are riding bikes, I can't see if they have an e-bike and they go to a park like that, not like Hamlet or something like that, but, you know, a bike park, I couldn't see a problem with that.
Sure. To answer your question, I don't know. I would assume or guess that there probably are e-bikes on that course, but I can't say that I've ever seen one. But I've never looked either.
Right. Any other thoughts on age requirements?
Manufacturer guidelines are really a good way to start. They're listed on, it's like a car seat, it has manufacturer guidelines, but it doesn't mean that our clarification can't be stronger in lieu of safety.
Maybe you're getting to this, but looking at the Edina, Excelsior, I don't see different age restrictions. They're just saying under the age of 18 that they must wear or shall wear a helmet or other protective headgear. So that'd be another approach, not necessarily changing the age, but requiring that helmet. Maybe you're getting to that.
Yeah, that's my next slide. I think
Okay,
so.
is it? All
Yeah.
right.
Yep.
Okay. Oh. I kind of like that approach of just at least imposing the helmet requirement.
Right. Yeah, I think to simplify this, right, at 18, you're a legal adult, you can do whatever you want, you can ride an e-bike. The state minimum age is 15, right? And so the challenging part is what do we do with a 16 and 17-year-old? What are your thoughts on imposing that safety certification?
Yeah, I am a huge fan, Ron. That was a fantastic example, suggestion. The certification aspect of things, like you said, as simple as a sticker for your helmet or something. You know, as I read through all three of these cities, they mention things that when I was 15, I did not know, nor did I pay attention to. Like when you're crossing the road, one of them actually suggests slowing down to a walking speed to cross the intersection. Now, I have personally seen some kids on scooters riding wheelies across the road without any regard to any traffic signal or, you know, if a car was coming. So, yeah, I would say that teaching these kids and ensuring that they're taught the various rules of the road is probably paramount to their safety. I don't remember which city it was that actually mentioned that, but I think that that's a fantastic thing to teach kids. But yeah, the certification program, you know, it's probably also not far off that insurance is going to be required to even ride one of these things, right? If you've read about any of the accidents that have happened across the country where somebody's hit by an e-bike, if it's somebody that doesn't have an umbrella policy, they don't have bike insurance, right? So like when you run somebody over and they end up hospitalized, who's paying the hospital bill? So that's going to get very interesting in the near term. I compare this e-bike situation most directly to like the AI boom, right? Nobody knows what they're doing. They don't know how to put the guardrails on it. They're being reactionary and things are going off the rails quick. Now with bikes, people are getting physically hurt. And, you know, you have three examples of cities that they've generated some fantastic policy, I think. Like you said, if you're going to wait for the state, you're going to probably be waiting for a while. I would be impressed if they do come out with something sooner than later, but at least you have three solid examples that you could base some policy for the local area off of. Yeah. Thank you for putting this together too, because this is very comprehensive. Thank you.
Welcome.
And Brad, I'd go back to my snowmobile and ATV endorsements, when you asked about 16, 17-year-old, even if they have a valid driver's license, depending on their age of when their birthday was, they still have to go get that endorsement to add it to their license. If they get pulled over on a snowmobile and they don't have the endorsement, they're in trouble. So I would think of it as that, for that age group that you identified there, think of it in that capacity, that certification would be huge for them then.
Right. All right, moving on to helmets. I think this will be easy one. Anybody under 18 requires a helmet?
Yeah.
All right. Absolutely. And then where do we let these things ride, right? So let's focus on e-bikes first. Do we have an interest in prohibiting or restricting certain areas? And if so, what are your thoughts?
I would say, looking at the motorized bicycle category, right now, those are just streets, but unfortunately, we're seeing them on trails, and so again, that's that enforcement piece, but those absolutely should not be on sidewalks, trails. Way too dangerous.
Right, I mean, that's the equivalent of a motorcycle traveling on sidewalks and bike trails, so.
I don't know, and I guess there's a big part of me that feels like even the class 1 to 3 e-bikes don't necessarily belong on trails where people are walking.
I think, was it Edina?
Do they have speed gauges on these bikes?
I don't know.
Okay.
Oh, actually, the very first example, the Edina one on the back page, where it talks about slowing when pedestrians are present, slowing to a walking pace.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think you need to restrict these areas as long as that's part of the policy, right? Slowing to a walking pace to cross an intersection or when pedestrians are present. It's kind of, I mean, even if they don't have speed gauges at that point, it's still something you can judge as a rider.
I think my challenge with that, though, and working with kids every day, is you can have rules in place all you want. It's whether they're going to choose to do them, and when they don't, what goes along with that. So that's a real concern, because at that age, 16, 15, 16, 17, they think they're pretty invincible, and they tend to do what they want to do when they want to do it many times, especially when there's not a parent around. So that would be a real concern of mine. Theoretically, it sounds good on paper, but I don't know that that's what you're going to really get.
Right. The one thing I would ask everybody to consider is if we ban them from trails and sidewalks, now we're pushing them into the road. And so that might not be the direction we want to go.
15-year-olds in the road.
I appreciate everybody's concerns, and I know that's one source of frustration and safety concern in the community, is that these bikes are whizzing past them on the trails, or they're not clearing those intersections where a trail intersects with a street. But if we ban them from the sidewalks and trails, that puts them in the road. And is that what we really want to accomplish? So just something to think about.
I also see a lot of older people riding e-bikes too, so I don't know that we want to necessarily lump everybody together as being a problem rider, because
Great point.
it is something that people as age can do for leisure and recreation. So
Yeah.
I think sometimes they're used very responsibly on trails. So
Yeah, I don't even know. I would have to agree with you. I think I see statistically more older people riding e-bikes now, like in my neighborhood, than the younger kids.
the ones that I see, the younger kids I see riding them are down on, like in the business districts around the Hy-Vees and the Dairy Queens, and that's where I've been seeing the
like
kids,
high
not necessarily on trails. So
Yeah, I see them oftentimes down by the Walgreens intersection, going full send mode across that intersection. Just no look,
right,
just full send.
No,
So
that is-
that's where my concern is. Like, they don't know the rules of
They're
the
in high
road.
traffic areas and they're not paying attention. Yeah.
Nor are most drivers either, so that's like, it's just waiting for something to happen, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's very scary. Like, I don't know the name of that road, but it's kind of like, it's right across from the Grove 80 apartments. And it's kind of like that one that'll go back, but you can pull out into 80th and it's kind of awkward, you know? But there's
Would probably, maybe.
maybe, I
Yeah.
don't know,
Okay.
street names. And then the cars can turn in when they're coming up 80th, they can turn into that one road right there. There's a lot of kids who come from high school and they're just like fly. I'm talking about, I will look right and I will look left and I'll look right and I'll look left and I'll start a little bit and all of a sudden somebody's right there. And that's very scary and very hard. And I think that is there ways that we can put signage up for them? I know that that was kind of something that we had talked about when we were talking about, before these became a big thing, and also marijuana too. We were sitting in the room and we were talking about if we should put signage up and things like that. Is that something
Yeah,
that,
definitely that's an option.
yeah?
Yeah, that was always my thought, to, if you, in the parks for sure, is segregate with striping on the tarred paths. You certainly could use all kinds of different signage, blind corners coming around, slow down. Again, to the point, are they gonna do it? At least we're trying. Where do they need to stop? Is there a pedestrian crosswalk type thing? But I think if we're gonna let them in the parks, then it has to have some type of signage now for bikes at that point.
Members of the commission, I can add, because we did talk a couple years ago about this, there was speed limit signs added of 15 miles an hour in the parks, but it is hard to enforce because how do you know that? And for the speedometer question, class 3 e-bikes do have speedometers. So the ones that go 28 miles an hour, it's a requirement they have a speedometer. The ones that are class 1 and 2 that go 20, they don't.
They don't, okay.
But in terms of enforcement, they do know how fast they're going. And I will say 28 miles an hour it's very fast on a trail.
Yeah, okay.
So we've covered some of this already. I can tell you that we invested a lot of time and resources this past summer, making a lot of educational stops, trying to educate the public. We did not do really any enforcement, right? We were trying to just educate the public so they're making smarter, safer decisions. And until we reach a point where we feel like the community is sufficiently educated, I don't feel that it's the right thing to do to start writing tickets, et cetera, especially when the statute and ordinances are lagging behind this market. So my point being is that we have not done any enforcement yet, right? I know we've received a lot of criticism that we're not doing anything. That's simply not true. We're just trying to take a measured approach. We're trying to educate the public. We're trying to figure out how we can reach these kids in the middle school, because usually they start riding around 12 years old. And so that's what we've been doing to date. The officers are making stops every day, sometimes, most of the time, just casual stops, right? We're not flipping on the lights and sirens and taking those traditional high visibility stops, but we're spending a lot of times in the parks, and when the kids ride by, we chat with them for a couple minutes and encourage them to to wear a helmet, or say, hey, you're too young for this, go home and talk to your parents about it, things like that. So that's what we've been doing over the last several months. Moving forward, I already talked about working with Youth Service Bureau to create a diversion program. We're going to get in the schools this spring is my goal. And then hopefully we'll be armed with some ordinance changes before next summer rolls around. And of course, along with that, there'll be all kinds of social media messaging and things of that nature to educate the entire community. And so really what I'm hopeful is that I can leave here tonight with some suggestions from you, and along with the input from other stakeholders, package it up neatly for council, present that to them in December, and hopefully move forward with some ordinance changes. At the very least, clean up some definitions, descriptions, and very clear guidelines on what is and is not allowed. Even if we don't take a more restrictive approach, those definitions and rules need to be cleaned up so we know, hey, this device fits into this bucket, and these are the rules for that type of vehicle. So that's my goal. And
Hey, Brad, one other thought came to my mind about the education part. I don't think it always has to be falling on the police department either. From the standpoint of, again, I'm using my snowmobile ATV analogy, that's all volunteers that put on those classes. You know, it's a local snowmobile club. Now, I don't know how organized e-bikes have, if they have their own associations or small groups or something, or maybe we have some ambassadors out there that we can start to educate, and they're the ones that actually host the class versus always having to use staff
that's a great
to do
idea. I
that.
love it.
You know, something like that too.
Great idea.
Because that's the way all your snowmobile, your gun safety endorsements, most of that's all done by volunteer organization, people giving up their time to teach kids, and they enjoy doing that kind of work.
So you're volunteering to do that?
I don't know if you put me on an e-bike though, but
The other piece would be with, like we talked about with the schools, is I know every year at the beginning of the school year, they do bus safety training. They have a video that's presented. I wonder if we couldn't use that same approach in the schools and have some type of video that we could show, not just e-bikes, but even on scooters, and the importance of helmets and that type of thing, but to kind of tie that overall safety element together when they do that.
I think that's a good idea, because then when they send out like the newsletters and things like that as well to the parents, they can attach that video so the parents can see it as well and help connect that education.
Right, which is what they did with the bus safety training. They got that out to all the parents, and so that might be a,
I would recommend doing it in the spring and then again in the fall, because you are going to have a wild summer with kids out in force, and they're just going to grow. And I'm not trying to make things difficult for you, but if you have a suggestion for the council approves, now you're talking about a certification program, developing a program, doing all the things, and then having an education campaign. It's doable, but I would recommend getting something into those schools before summer.
Yeah, that's
And
the
then
goal.
hitting and having a great, huge education campaign, again, going back to school, because, you know, parents are thirsty for that information once the kids go back to school.
So I have kids in school, and I get, every Friday they send out a weekly newsletter. This is what we're doing, and it's probably a good add-on to that. E-bike safety. Because maybe the parents will read it. I read it, but it's just another avenue to share that.
I think the video is a great idea to try to reach kids and parents without having a huge strain on your resources too. So it seems like a nice place to start, and then maybe build from there.
Great. It's all great feedback. Thank you. I'll just invite any of your recommendations, if you feel strongly that, hey, I don't want e-bikes on our trails or things like that. So if there's anything that you feel really strongly about that I want to package up for council, please share that with me now or in the near future.
all right, thanks, Brad.
All right.
Especially for having to put this together right away for us.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Very nicely done.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, with that then, that ends our presentations tonight. We can move on to our commissioner comments. Are there any comments this evening that anybody needs to share? I do have a thank you to give to Captain Peterson. I brought forward from both, I looked at it from my bus driving career and my commissioner hat and my resident hat, some of the issues that we have at Park High School right now. For those that don't know, people that have kids in Park know that it's under construction. And so all the traffic's been diverted. Buses come out at a different angle. We're coming out of Crestview, and it just makes for quite a mess. And I was really worried about, in fact, it was the e-bike part of it, is when you're coming out of Crestview and you're trying to make a left turn onto 80th, it's pretty tough. With the way traffic backs up. So first of all, traffic is one thing, and then the e-bikes, all the kids are coming out of school and they're coming down that sidewalk, and in these buses, you got blind spots that are crazy, and you're looking left, you're looking right, and I'm just so fearful that we were gonna have an accident, and the police department met with me, and I shared some concerns over it, and they've actually come out and helped us with some traffic direction, which has been awesome. So I can't thank you enough, Brad, and your staff for the support that you've shown us. I know as a bus driver that's in, quote-unquote, the belly of the beast every day out there, it's certainly been very helpful and very much appreciated by our bus drivers for sure from a safety perspective. And again, just to remind the public there, that's hopefully just a one-year cure. And by next year, the whole bus route will be different going, and the parents going in and out of the school is going to be a lot more convenient than what it is today right now because of the construction that's going on. So thank you to you and your staff. I very much appreciate it.
What's that, Dave?
The next year, right?
Oh, and then
Planning it pretty good.
From tip to toe.
Yep.
Wow.
Okay, if there's no other, then we'll move on to our staff reports. I'm not sure who we'll start with. Does it want to start left to right to left, or?
I think Ryan should go first.
Okay. Yeah, he's had it kind of easy today, hasn't he? So we'll have Ryan go first.
And I'll go quick. It's been a good night with a lot of discussion. So just a few of the key points. So one, last time you'll hear me talk about it because it's up now, is that Hardwood Court signal was made operational today. Just a reminder, that was put in. Obviously, traffic's been growing, but the crash rate was much higher there, so that was part of the warrants and the justification for that signal. And it is designed for basically the full build-out of Cottage Grove and looking at potential redevelopment in the area. We kind of wanted a worst-case scenario. I know it feels like it's very close to 80th Street, but we looked at that every which way. And I mean, never say never. If an ambulance goes through or a lot of pedestrian activity, certainly things can back up and double cycle. But that was part of the plan for that area, and now it's just getting used to that new signal. So good to see that operational. Like Councilmember Thiede mentioned, we do have the 80th Street project next year, reconstructing 80th from Ideal Avenue all the way to 61, including redoing the entire interchange, MnDOT. That's kind of a MnDOT portion of the work, but we're doing it with our project, so it's all very coordinated. And then also redoing East Point Douglas Road from 80th down to like Arby's by Hy-Vee there. So it's
an overlay, or is there like in-depth real construction?
So it is a full pavement replacement, Commissioner. So it is a full pavement replacement, more kind of spot curb replacement, sidewalk, things like that. Not a lot of utility work. The utilities aren't that old in that area. But upgrading signals, doing like dual left turn lanes at 80th and Hardwood, so that works much better. Adding an additional lane going through by Hy-Vee. Right now that lane ends and kind of 2 lanes go into Hy-Vee, one ends. There'll be an extra lane going on East Point Douglas, so a lot of improvements as well. And like Councilmember Thiede mentioned, we're being very careful at Park High School. So our intent is to have all the work done from Hinton to Ideal just in the summer. So we're going to kind of fit that in because that's the newest section of road. It needs the least amount of work with the concrete. So fit all that in during the summer. So we're really not impacting the school. And then we'll be adding the turn lanes that the school needs for the new entrances. So it should time out well. Just other than that, the low zone water tower, if you're on Highway 61, you look behind the park and ride, you can see it, the concrete column sticking up above, so you can kind of see where that tower is going to be. They're done with concrete. They'll be working now over the winter on the metal actual bowl and then painting it next summer and getting that operational. And then lastly, the intermediate zone water treatment plant. That's the big treatment plant going behind the fire station. We're started pouring concrete. We were going to pour 15,000 yards of concrete between now and next July. And that's all we'll be doing for about 8 months. And then you'll start to see the building itself go up. So a lot of work still to come, and the fire staff have been a great partner because we kind of came in and we're working very closely with them, but not impacting operations of the fire station, but they've worked well with us as well. So I need to say thank you to them. And that's all I have. I don't know if Gary has anything quick.
A couple quick minutes here. Yep. With the weather changing, tomorrow could be our first time out. So something that we tested last year. Yeah. 3 trucks we tested treated salt, so it's a brown colored salt. It worked so well, we were able to get about a 20% cut back and probably even a little more yet. So people might think we're putting down sand, but it's just a treated salt that's more effective in cold temperatures, and with less amounts of warm temperatures, it'll clear off the roads. And a couple big things to remind, no parking 2 to 6 or anytime it interferes with snow plowing. So good rule of thumb, if it's snowing out, get your cars off the road, we can get the roads plowed curb to curb. And one thing we're still having a big problem with is garbage cans in the street. The trucks can reach 5 feet up into them driveways, so if we could just somehow even let your neighbors know if you see it, especially in the new developments, we have a hard time getting down the roads because their cans are sticking out in the road. That'd be a big help to us, so. Slight chance we could get a little accumulation tomorrow, nothing big, but we're prepared, we're ready. And with that, any questions?
No?
All right, thank
So
you.
Ryan, quick question for you. When the East Point Douglas, didn't we have a discussion about the sidewalk going on the other side too? Did they decide not to do that?
Commissioner, what sidewalk?
So you have the sidewalk on Highway 61 side.
Yes.
But didn't we have a discussion about when that gets redone to put the sidewalk on the residential side too? So that they didn't have to cross? I thought we had a discussion about that.
And you're speaking of on 80th Street?
No, on East Point Douglas, that stretch to take you from like the Applebee's down to.
Animal clinic.
Oh, I see, yep. Thank you, sorry, I was focusing more, so next year we are only redoing down to Arby's, so that little section. And then we are looking at sidewalks and pedestrian improvements. 2027 is when we'll redo that long stretch of East Point by the
gotcha.
home. So apologize for that, I was thinking of the small
Well, it's just a
section,
bad
so-
question.
Yep. But yep, that is something we're definitely looking at. So we're looking at additional sidewalks and pedestrian crossings as well on East Point Douglas Road.
Okay, thank you. With that, we'll move to Brad.
All right. In preparation for winter weather, we started our winter parking enforcement, so trying to get those cars off the street for you, Gary. Some good news, we received a grant to do our youth academy again in 2026, so that was a huge success this year. It was the first ever youth academy earlier this year. And so we'll be doing that again in 2026, some more to come on that.
What's the age for youth academy?
I don't know. I'll have to get back to you on that.
So that's different than like the Citizens Academy?
It's similar in format, but it caters to youth, yeah. Yep. We just recently released our quarter three report, so if you're interested in seeing our progress report, look that up on social media or our website. And then probably the biggest news coming from the police department is we're getting our third patrol canine arriving in a couple weeks. So that'll be residing with Officer Whalen. And so we'll get to meet our new canine in a couple weeks, so stand by for that.
All right, thank you, Brad. Any questions?
The other two canines that we have, they're still good and young, and are you scheduled to like retire any soon? Is this a replacement of?
No, it's just an addition. Our goal is to get to 4 at some point, so each crew has a canine assigned to it. And so that's a 2-year plan, so this third one gets us 3/4 of the way there. The other 2 canines, Odin and Scout, are right in the middle of their best years. So we've got, fingers crossed, a handful of good years left to come with those dogs.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. And then
We say
John?
the same thing about Brad too, but, sorry, you set it up too well, so. No, thank you for the engagement in our standards to cover community risk assessment process. I know a lot of folks have had different parts in that, and then on top of our strategic plan last year. So it has been a lot of stuff to digest, and very thankful for your engagement and really genuine and then a couple just quick updates from our department. I'm very proud to share that last year we did we hired folks that are firefighter EMTs, and then we send them to paramedic school. It's the first time our department's really engaged in that. On the fire side, our police side did that years ago, and then they signed an agreement to stay with us 5 years. Our first person went through that program last year and obtained their paramedic. So we're very happy for that, and it goes to Commissioner Moyer's question of how do we get folks in the door and how to give people those opportunities. So I think that's a great example of that. Further on, we look like we'll be starting our cadet next month, which again will be the first cadet we've had here. That gives somebody with very little or no experience, and it gives them the opportunity to become a fire professional. And I'm very bias in this from some of the best people in the business to train them and teach them on how to become a firefighter, and hopefully we'll be able to keep them one day as a full-time firefighter. And then lastly, just an update just on our response. And of course, I don't know how much more data I can inundate you with in one night. However, we are on pace to eclipse 5,000 calls this year, and we're actually on pace for 5,300, and that's just assuming the current pace, with December usually being one of our busiest months. And just to put in perspective, we just crossed the 4,000 threshold in 2021. So just a lot of growth in our city. And really, it's Cottage Grove is growing about 9 to 10% in that call volume. So obviously, there are just a growing community, but we're happy and we're very proud of the services we provide to folks. So barring any like pure prevention of all diseases, we will be eclipsing that 5,000 this year. So thank you.
Any questions for John? No? All right, well then, that's our staff reports. We'll move on to council comments.
Well, you guys got
Councilman
the council agendas in your packets and so forth, whether you scan through those, whether you had any questions or anything,
Keating? Any questions? No, must be
okay,
clear
there
as
you
mud.
go. Short and sweet.
All right,
Well, I missed the general comment question opportunity, so sorry I missed that one. What is going in where the essay was that was next to Las Margaritas?
I don't know if we're able to actually say yet. There's a couple different retail companies that are looking at that. There's one that's maybe a little bit stronger, but yeah, I don't know if we're able to actually.
I didn't know if I missed it from like the.
And for all I know, Myron may have already put it in Facebook, but
No, I was wondering too. Good question. Yeah.
I thought maybe I just missed the Facebook update. I didn't know. Okay. So TBD,
right.
TB or TBA, to be announced. Okay. That's it. That was my only question.
all right. Thank you, Doug. So that ends our meeting, so I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second?
I have a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Great meeting.